Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the life of someone who didn't just want to disrupt a single industry, but decided to completely rewrite the rules for transportation, energy, space, and, believe it or not, the human brain itself. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. That's not just some catchy motivational poster. It's actually the perfect framework for everything we're about to cover in this explainer. Because time and time again, he took science fiction, looked at the absolutely impossible odds, and somehow made it reality. Section 1. A boy from South Africa, the early years. So to really get this, we gotta start at the beginning. Born in 1971 in Pretoria, South Africa, his childhood was definitely not easy. He was introverted, heavily bullied by his classmates, and just always lost in thought. But while the outside world was incredibly hostile, he retreated inward. He just devoured science fiction, physics, and engineering books, quietly building this massive universe entirely inside his own mind. And his trajectory, lightning fast. Born in 71, by 83, at just 12 years old, this lonely kid teaches himself to program and actually creates and sells a video game called Blaster. Pretty wild, right? Then in 88, he heads to Canada, aiming for America, the absolute epicenter of innovation. Which leads us to 1995. He gets accepted into a super prestigious PhD program at Stanford and drops out exactly 2 days later. 2 days. The internet boom was exploding, and there was no way he was going to miss out. Section 2. The internet boom, Zip2, and PayPal. His first big win was a company called Zip2, which he started with his brother. And I mean, they were so broke, he was literally sleeping in the office and showering at a local YMCA. But that insane grind paid off massively when Compaq bought Zip2 for over $300 million. Now, most people, they'd retire right there on a beach somewhere. Not him. He rolled the dice again, founded X.com to shake up banking, which, as you probably know, eventually became PayPal. $1.5 billion. Let that number sink in. That is exactly what eBay paid to acquire PayPal back in 2002. Practically overnight, he was extraordinarily wealthy. He had essentially won the Silicon Valley lottery. But here is the absolute turning point of his life. Instead of protecting that massive fortune, he risked almost all of it to build the future. Why? Well, he started asking this incredibly profound question that nobody else was even thinking about. What happens if humanity never becomes a multi-planet species? He really truly believed we needed a backup plan for civilization, and he was willing to bet the whole shebang to build it. Moving on to Section 3, Rockets, Cars, and Disasters, the 2008 crisis. Honestly, this was the darkest chapter of his life. Those grand sci-fi dreams of space and electric cars, they suddenly crashed headfirst into the brutal realities of physics and finance. Total failure wasn't just, a slight risk. It looked absolutely inevitable. Just look at the stakes here. You have SpaceX practically bankrupt after their first 3 rockets blew up. Tesla is rapidly running out of cash. The 2008 global financial crisis is completely tanking the economy. And on top of all that, his marriage is falling apart. It's reported he took the very last drops of his PayPal money and threw it into these failing companies. And then, a literal miracle happens. That 4th SpaceX launch, it works. And it secures a massive, life-saving contract from NASA just in the absolute nick of time. So, with the companies barely clinging to life, he officially steps in as Tesla's CEO in 2008, rolling out a seriously bold 2-step master plan. Step 1, prove electric vehicles can actually outperform gas cars. Remember, back then, EVs were basically seen as glorified golf carts, but the Model S, X, 3, and Y, they totally flipped the script. Step 2, force global automakers to adapt to this brand new standard. And it worked. He didn't just build a car brand, he dragged a century-old global industry kicking and screaming into the future. And meanwhile, over at SpaceX, just getting to orbit wasn't nearly enough. Picture this, a Falcon 9 booster comes back to Earth and lands vertically. Boom. He did what aerospace experts swore was economically impossible. By reusing rockets, they completely slashed the cost of space travel. It was this historic, gravity-defying game-changer that completely locked in SpaceX's dominance. Which brings us to Section 4, expanding the ecosystem, mind, earth, and web. Because apparently running Tesla and SpaceX at the exact same time just wasn't stressful enough, right? He starts launching even more mind-bending, hyper-complex ventures.
Look at the sheer scale of these visionary goals. You've got Starlink aiming to beam internet access to the entire globe via satellites. Then there's Neuralink, literally trying to merge the human brain with computers. They even started human trials in the 2020s so patients could control tech just by thinking. And the Boring Company, digging underground transit tunnels to cure traffic. Now, to his supporters, he's architecting humanity's next century. But to his critics, these are just wildly impossible distractions.
At the exact same time, he makes this incredibly aggressive pivot into the digital space. In 2022, he buys Twitter in a massively publicized deal. Cut to 2023, he renames it X, which actually traces way back to his early X.com vision of this ultimate everything app for communication, finance, and media. That very same year, he jumps right into the deep end of the artificial intelligence race, launching XAI to compete at the absolute frontier of tech. Section 5. Controversies and the Future, a Polarizing Legacy. Now, we really need to take an objective look at this because the legacy he's building is profoundly polarizing. His public persona, his management style, his political involvement, it has all sparked intense, nonstop debate all over the world. People essentially view him through two entirely different lenses. On one side, to millions of people, he is the visionary, a genius driving critical innovation and actively pushing humanity forward. But on the other side, to millions of others, he is the disruptor, a figure whose actions, public statements, and business moves are reckless, controversial, and highly polarizing. So, depending on who you talk to, he's either saving the future or completely destabilizing the present. Fast forward to 2026, and his wealth has reached absolutely unprecedented levels, mostly thanks to the massive, unstoppable growth of SpaceX and his other ventures. The scale of this ecosystem is just staggering. But if you strip all that away and look closely at his actions, the underlying mission, the exact same thing that motivated that lonely kid reading sci-fi in South Africa, really hasn't changed. It has always been about expanding the very boundaries of what humanity can achieve. Which leaves us with this final thought. Will history remember him as a visionary, a disruptor, or a highly controversial pioneer? Look, whether you admire the guy or criticize him, you absolutely cannot deny that he has permanently altered the course of the 21st century. And honestly, the most fascinating part of it all, his story is still being written. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.